A blood-soaked mafia boss walks through rain-drenched streets, leaving carnage in his wake, until he arrives at a small art gallery where an innocent woman laughs among her paintings, completely unaware she's being watched. Lucien d'Amore, the notorious devil of the underworld, enters with armed guards and publicly claims Serafina Vale as his bride-to-be in front of her boyfriend, her family, and all her guests. She doesn't know him. She doesn't want him. But Lucien reveals a terrifying truth. 3 years ago, she saved his life, and now he's come to collect the debt. Obsession, power, and desperation collide as he begins tearing apart her world to make her his, proving he will burn everything to the ground before letting her go. Welcome to Afro-Korean Dynasty Stories. Relax and enjoy this interesting story. To ensure you get first-hand notification of our latest stores, please subscribe, comment where you're watching from. This story crosses borders because betrayal speaks every language. Like and share Serafina Sarah. Vale is an idealistic art student struggling to support herself and her charming boyfriend Elliot Kane through graduate school. While she pours her heart into her paintings and dreams of a simple, honest future, Lucien d'Amore, the city's most feared mafia boss, known only as the Devil, becomes fixated on her after she unknowingly saved his life 3 years earlier. Despite her horror and desperate refusal, Lucien uses his empire, his wealth, and ruthless manipulation to expose Elliot's betrayals and trap Serafina's family in impossible debt. Cornered, she's forced into a 1-year contract marriage in exchange for her family's survival. What begins as captivity transforms into a psychological and emotional war between terror, defiance, obsession, and an unexpected tenderness that neither of them saw coming, setting the stage for brutal betrayals, violent protection, and the question of whether a devil can be redeemed by the only woman who ever saw him as human. The morning after the gallery disaster, Serafina woke to find Lucien d'Amore sitting in her apartment, not outside, not knocking, inside, in her kitchen drinking coffee like he owned the place. She screamed. He didn't even blink. "Good morning, Serafina," he said calmly. "We need to talk about your debt. Get out before I call the police." He smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Go ahead. Not try." That's when the nightmare truly began. Lucien was everywhere, at her favorite cafe, sitting at her usual table, outside her art class, leaning against a black car, at her family's small textile business, talking quietly with her panicking father. Each time, he said the same thing. "You owe me a debt. Your life for mine." But Serafina had no memory of saving anyone. She told Elliot everything, and he immediately urged her to get a restraining order. They went to the police station together, holding hands. The officer took one look at Lucien's name on the paperwork and laughed. "You want to file against Lucien d'Amore? Miss, go home. Forget this ever happened." "But he's stalking me." "I said go home." The officer's voice turned cold. "Some people you don't fight. You just stay out of their way." Elliot tried 2 more lawyers. Both refused the case the moment they heard Lucien's name. One actually went pale and asked them to leave his office immediately. That's when Serafina realized the horrible truth. Lucien didn't just have power, he owned everything. The police, the courts, half the city. There was nowhere to run. 3 days later, a man in an expensive suit appeared at her parents' shop. He was tall, intimidating, with cold eyes that missed nothing. "I'm Damien Crowe," he said, "Mr. d'Amore's representative." He placed a folder on the counter. Inside were documents, bank statements, transfer records, all showing one terrible fact. Her family's business was completely bankrupt, and the person who'd been stealing from them for 2 years was Elliot Kane. Serafina's mother started crying. Her father just stared at the papers in shock. "You're lying," Serafina whispered. "Elliot would never—" "The evidence doesn't lie." Damien's voice was flat. "Your family will lose everything. The shop, your home, all of it. Unless— Unless what? Unless you agree to Mr. D'Amore's terms." That evening, Lucien came to her apartment again. This time she didn't scream. She was too tired, too scared, too broken. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Marry me for 1 year. I'll clear every debt, restore your family's business, and make sure Elliot faces justice. Refuse, and I'll let them all burn." "Why?" Serafina's voice cracked. "Why are you doing this to me?" Lucien stepped closer. For the first time, she saw something other than cold control in his eyes, something desperate, something almost human. "Because 3 years ago you saw me as human," he said quietly. "And I haven't felt human since." Serafina closed her eyes. Her family would lose everything. Elliot had betrayed them all. She had no choice, no escape, no freedom. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll marry you." Lucien's entire body relaxed, like he'd been holding his breath. "Good. The wedding is in 3 days. Don't even think about running." He leaned close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'll find you. I always will." After he left, Serafina sat alone in the dark and cried. She'd just agreed to marry the devil himself. And somewhere deep inside, she knew her life would never be the same. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of chaos that Serafina couldn't control. Women in elegant suits arrived at her apartment with measuring tapes and fabric samples. They measured every inch of her body, speaking in a language she didn't understand. French? Maybe Italian? Designer gowns appeared like magic, shoes that cost more than her rent, jewelry that felt heavy and cold against her skin. "Stand still," one woman commanded, pinning white silk around her waist. "Mr. D'Amore wants perfection." Serafina wanted to scream that she didn't care what Mr. D'Amore wanted, but she stayed silent. What was the point? On the second day, 2 men in black suits showed up at her door. "Your security detail," they explained. They followed her everywhere, to the bathroom, to her parents' shop. Even when she tried to take a walk to clear her head, they were 3 steps behind. She was a prisoner before she'd even said her vows. That afternoon, Damien Crowe appeared at the bridal suite where she was being prepared. He dismissed everyone else with a single look, then turned those cold eyes on Serafina. "Let me be very clear," he said. "You're a liability. Lucien has enemies who would love nothing more than to use you against him. If you make him weak, if you become a problem." He leaned closer. "I'll eliminate you myself." Serafina's hands shook. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Doesn't matter. You're here now. Don't make me regret letting you live." After he left, Serafina sat alone, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back wore a dress worth more than her entire life, but her eyes were empty. Wedding day arrived too fast. The cathedral was massive, with stained glass windows that cast colored light across marble floors. Hundreds of people filled the pews, men in expensive suits with hard faces, women dripping in diamonds and danger. This wasn't a wedding. It was a gathering of the underworld's most powerful families. And at the altar stood Lucien D'Amore, dressed in a black suit that made him look like death himself. Sharp, perfect, terrifying. Serafina walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Her dad was crying. She felt numb. When she reached Lucien, he took her hand. His grip was firm but not painful. He was watching her like she might disappear if he looked away. The priest spoke words Serafina didn't hear. Her heart was pounding too loud. When it came time for vows, she leaned close and whispered, "I'll never love you." Lucian's expression didn't change. He just said very quietly, "You will. I'm patient." Then he kissed her. It was brief, possessive, claiming. The crowd erupted in applause. Suddenly, there was shouting from the back. "Stop! She's being held hostage!" Elliot. He'd somehow gotten past security, was running down the aisle, screaming about kidnapping and forced marriage. Lucian didn't even turn around. He just raised one hand. Immediately, his men grabbed Elliot, dragging him backward as he fought and yelled. "Send him my regards in prison," Lucian said calmly. Then he took Serafina's hand and led her out of the cathedral like nothing had happened. That night, Serafina stood in the master bedroom of Lucian's mansion, shaking. She knew what happened on wedding nights. She braced herself for violence, for pain, for everything she'd feared. Instead, Lucian opened a different door. "This is your room." Serafina blinked. The room was beautiful, huge windows, soft lighting, and everywhere she looked there were art supplies. Paints, canvases, brushes, bookshelves filled with her favorite authors, everything she'd ever mentioned loving in casual conversation. "How did you—" "I pay attention," Lucian said. He stood in the doorway, not coming closer. "I'm a monster, Serafina, but I'm not that kind of monster. Sleep. Tomorrow your new life begins." Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Serafina stood alone, confused and terrified. This wasn't what she'd expected. None of this was. And somehow that made it even more frightening. Living with Lucian d'Amore was like living with a hurricane. You never knew when the calm would turn into a storm. Serafina quickly learned his routine. Every morning at exactly 5 o'clock, she heard him leave his room. Curious, despite herself, she once peeked out to see where he went. The home gym. For 2 hours, he pushed his body past normal limits, lifting weights that seemed impossible, hitting a punching bag until his knuckles bled. One morning, she saw him shirtless. His back was covered in scars. Some looked like knife wounds, others like burns. Each one told a story of violence she didn't want to imagine. During the day, he ran his empire from a home office. She heard phone calls sometimes. His voice would turn to ice when someone failed him. "You have 24 hours to fix this, or you're done." Done meant something permanent in his world. She learned not to ask questions. People feared him. Even Damien, who seemed afraid of nothing, chose his words carefully around Lucian. But they also worshipped him. Loyalty in his world was everything. Yet privately, Lucian was different. Every evening he'd find her, in her art room, in the garden, wherever she'd hidden that day. "How was your day?" he'd ask, like they were a normal couple. At first, Serafina ignored him. Then she gave one-word answers, but he kept asking. Never pushed, just asked. The kitchen was always stocked with things she loved. Strawberry jam from the specific brand she'd mentioned once, the tea her mother used to make, books by her favorite author would appear on her nightstand. "How do you know these things?" she finally asked one night. Lucian looked up from his paperwork. "I pay attention to what matters." He never touched her without permission, not even a hand on her shoulder. If he needed to move past her, he'd say, "Excuse me," and wait for her to step aside. It was almost funny, this man who took everything by force, waiting patiently for her to move. The strangest thing happened when she had nightmares. She'd wake up gasping, afraid, and hear something outside her door. One night, she opened it. Lucien was sitting against the wall in the hallway, still dressed, eyes tired. "What are you doing?" "Making sure you're safe," he said simply. "Go back to sleep." 2 weeks into the marriage, Lucien announced they were attending a gala. "Business," he explained. "You'll need to be seen with me." The event was overwhelming. Beautiful people in expensive clothes, all of them dangerous underneath the polish. Serafina felt like prey surrounded by predators. Then a woman approached. She was stunning. Long, dark hair, perfect face, wearing a dress that probably cost more than a car. Valentina Noir. "So you're the little artist," Valentina said, looking Serafina up and down like she was examining something dirty. "How cute." "Valentina," Lucien's voice held a warning. "Oh, relax, Lucien." Valentina smiled, but her eyes were cold. "I'm just introducing myself to your wife." She said the word like it tasted bad. Then she leaned close to Serafina. "You're just a phase, darling. When Lucien gets bored, I'll be waiting." After she walked away, Serafina felt sick. Later, when Lucien was talking to other men, Serafina excused herself to get air. The parking garage was quiet, dimly lit. She was halfway to their car when she heard footsteps. 4 men surrounded her. She recognized one from Valentina's table. "Nothing personal," one said, "just sending a message." They grabbed her, tearing her dress. She screamed, fought back, but there were too many. A fist connected with her face. Pain exploded across her cheek. Then suddenly, gunshots, bodies dropping, screaming. When Serafina looked up through blurred vision, Lucien was there. The violence was terrifying, fast, brutal, efficient. He moved like a weapon. Within seconds, all 4 men were dead. Then he was kneeling beside her and his hands were shaking. His hands never shook. "Did they touch you?" His voice broke. "Tell me everywhere they touched you." It wasn't anger in his eyes. It was terror, pure, absolute fear. For the first time since this nightmare began, Serafina reached out voluntarily. She touched his face, felt him freeze under her hand. "I'm okay," she whispered. "You came in time." Lucien's eyes closed. He leaned into her touch like a dying man finding water. And Serafina realized something that changed everything. The devil of the underworld was afraid of losing her. After the attack, Serafina couldn't stop thinking about the fear in Lucien's eyes. It didn't match the monster everyone said he was. So she started paying closer attention, piecing together the puzzle of who Lucien d'Amore really was. She found old newspapers in his study, headlines from 15 years ago. "Mafia family slaughtered, only son survives." There was a photo of a small boy with empty eyes. Lucien had been 8 years old when a rival family murdered his parents in front of him. Damien, surprisingly, filled in more details one afternoon when he found her reading. "His uncle raised him," Damien said quietly, "trained him like a weapon. No childhood, no friends, just survival lessons and combat training. By 23, he'd taken control of the entire organization. Youngest boss in history." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you should know what you're dealing with. He survived 17 assassination attempts. 17 times people tried to kill him. Most men don't survive one." Damien paused. "He's never had a relationship, only transactions, people wanting something from him." That night, Serafina found medical records Lucien had left on his desk. From 3 years ago. 17 stab wounds, collapsed lung. The doctor's notes said, patient had given up, showed no will to fight. The 18th attempt, the night she found him. Suddenly, everything made horrible sense. She'd found him in that alley, barely alive, and she'd stayed, held his hand, called for help, told him he wasn't alone, and somehow, and that small act of kindness had made him want to live. She was still processing this when her phone buzzed. unknown number. "Sarah, it's me, Elliot." Her heart stopped. "How did you—" "They released me. Not enough evidence." He sounded desperate. "Listen, I know you think I stole from your family, but Lucien set me up, all of it. You have to believe me." "Elliot, meet me tomorrow, the coffee shop on 5th Street. Please, I'll explain everything. We can run away together. I'll protect you from that monster." He hung up before she could respond. That evening, Serafina found Lucien in his office. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Did you frame Elliot?" Lucien looked up slowly. "No." "Then how—" "I simply made sure the evidence of his crimes was found. Bank transfers, fake invoices, everything. He did it all himself. I just pointed the investigators in the right direction." Serafina's hand shook. "You destroyed his life. He was destroying yours." Lucien's voice was cold. "He used you, stole from your family. The moment he couldn't use you anymore, he would have left." "You don't know that." "I know men like him." Serafina stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Why do you even care what happens to me? Why this obsession? Just tell me the truth." Lucien stood. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then something in his expression cracked. The mask he always wore slipped away, and underneath was something raw and desperate. "Because when I was dying in that alley," he said quietly, "everyone walked past. Dozens of people saw me bleeding and did nothing. But you stayed." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "You saw me, not the devil, not the monster. Just me, and I've been trying to find that feeling again ever since." Serafina's breath caught. "What feeling?" "Being human." Lucien's hands clenched into fists. "You made me feel human, Serafina. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me and didn't see a weapon or a target or a tool. You just saw a person who needed help, and you helped. You didn't know who I was, didn't want anything from me, you just cared." Tears burned in Serafina's eyes. "So you trapped me, forced me to marry you." "I'm not good at asking for things," Lucien said. "I only know how to take. It's all I was ever taught." He looked away. "I know it's wrong. I know I'm a monster, but I couldn't let you go. I can't." Serafina stared at him, this powerful, terrifying man who'd built an empire on fear, and she finally understood. He wasn't keeping her prisoner out of cruelty. He was desperate not to lose the only person who'd ever made him feel like more than a monster. Over the next week, Elliot kept calling. Each time, his voice was more desperate, more convincing. "He's a killer, Sarah. He'll never let you go. This is your only chance." Serafina wanted to ignore him, but doubt ate at her. Yes, Lucien had showed her kindness, but he'd also forced her into this marriage, trapped her, taken away her freedom. Then one of the maids approached her quietly. "Miss Serafina, I have a message from Elliot Kane." The maid's name was Rosa. She'd always been kind to Serafina, sneaking her extra desserts, asking about her paintings. Now she handed over a detailed plan. "There's a scheduled blackout tomorrow night for electrical work," Rosa whispered. "I'll put something in Mr. D'Amore's wine at dinner, something to make him sleep. You'll have 30 minutes to get out before the backup generators kick in." Serafina stared at the paper. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've seen how you look at the doors, like a bird in a cage." Rosa squeezed her hand. Everyone deserves freedom. That night, Serafina barely slept. By morning, she'd made her decision. Maybe it was wrong. Maybe Lucien did care in his own twisted way. But this wasn't love. This was possession. Dinner felt like torture. Lucien talked about his day, asked about her painting. So normal, so careful. When Rosa poured his wine, Serafina's heart hammered so loud she was sure he could hear it. "Are you all right?" Lucien asked, noticing her shaking hands. "Just Tired, she lied. He drank the wine. All of it. So 20 minutes later, his words started slurring. I feel strange. You should rest, Serafina said, her voice barely steady. Lucian stood, stumbled slightly, then looked at her with confused eyes. Serafina, what? But he couldn't finish. His legs gave out. Damien caught him, looking alarmed. Get him to his room, Serafina said. He must be sick. The moment they carried Lucien away, the lights went out. Right on schedule. Rosa grabbed Serafina's arm. Go! Now! Serafina ran. Through the dark hallways, out a side door Rosa had unlocked, into the night. A car was waiting with keys in the ignition. She drove like her life depended on it. The docks were dark and smelled like salt and fish. Elliot stood under a flickering streetlight, waving. Relief flooded through her. Elliot! She ran toward him. Then she saw the men behind him, 5 of them, all armed, faces hard. Serafina stopped. Who are they? Business partners, Elliot said. His smile wasn't the warm one she remembered. It was cold, calculated. What's going on? Sorry, Sarah, but I've got debts too. Turns out you're worth a lot more than I thought. He nodded to the men. $5 million to be exact. Lucien's enemies are very interested in his new wife. The world tilted. You're selling me? Lucien ruined my life, took my future. This is just business. Elliot actually shrugged. Nothing personal. Serafina tried to run. They caught her easily. A fist connected with her stomach. She collapsed, gasping. They dragged her to a warehouse, tied her to a chair, hit her when she screamed. Hours passed. Maybe days. She lost track. Then the warehouse door opened. Lucien stumbled in, alone, unarmed, barely able to stand. The drug was still affecting him. He could barely walk straight. Let her go, he said, his voice weak. The enemy boss laughed. The great Lucien d'Amore walking into a trap? And for what? A woman? Take me instead. Lucien's legs shook. She's innocent. This is between us. Oh, this is too perfect. The boss circled him like a predator. The devil himself kneeling for a woman. How pathetic. Lucien dropped to his knees, not because he was forced. He chose to. Please. His voice broke completely. She's all I have. Serafina's breath caught. She'd seen Lucien kill without hesitation, seen him command respect with a single look. But now he was begging, on his knees, defenseless, for her. You drugged me, he said, not looking at her. You ran. You chose him over me. And I still came, because even if you hate me, even if you never forgive me, I'll still protect you. Tears streamed down Serafina's face. What had she done? Elliot had betrayed her, sold her like property. But Lucien, the monster everyone feared, had walked into certain death just to save her. She'd destroyed the only person who ever truly protected her. I'm sorry, she whispered. Lucien, I'm so sorry. His eyes met hers. Even drugged, even beaten, even kneeling before his enemies, he smiled at her. It's okay, he said softly. I understand. The enemy boss raised his gun to Lucien's head. Any last words, devil? Lucien didn't look at the gun. He looked at Serafina. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. The boss's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the warehouse exploded with gunfire. Damien burst through the door with 20 armed men. The rescue was fast, brutal, and absolute. Lucien's enemies didn't stand a chance, but it was Lucien himself who became truly terrifying. The moment Damien tossed him a weapon, something changed. The drug was still in his system, but it didn't matter anymore. Lucien moved like death itself, precise, merciless, unstoppable. He didn't just kill his enemies. He made them suffer for touching what was his. Serafina had never seen violence like this. It should have horrified her. Maybe it did, but she couldn't look away. When the last enemy fell, silence filled the warehouse. Bodies everywhere, blood pooling on the concrete. Then Lucian was in front of her, cutting her bindings with shaking hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice broken. "I'm so sorry I didn't protect you." "If I'd been stronger, if I'd been faster—" "Stop!" Serafina grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "I'm the one who should apologize. I drugged you. I ran. I trusted the wrong person. This is my fault." "No." Lucien's hands covered hers. "You had every right to run. I took your freedom. I trapped you. I forced you into a life you never wanted. You were trying to escape a prison I built." "Lucian, I'm a monster, Serafina. You were right to run." They took her to the hospital first. Bruises, a cracked rib, cuts that needed stitches. Lucian stayed by her bed the entire time, holding her hand like she might disappear. Elliot was arrested that night. Turned out he'd been selling information to Lucian's enemies for months. The proof was undeniable. "Did you know?" Serafina asked Lucian quietly. "That he'd betray me?" "I suspected, but I hoped I was wrong." He looked away. "I wanted to be wrong about him, for your sake." 3 days later, Serafina was released from the hospital. When they arrived home, Lucian led her to his office. A folder sat on his desk. "What's this?" "Annulment papers." Lucian's voice was carefully controlled. "Already signed, legal, official. You can leave whenever you want." Serafina opened the folder. There it was, her freedom in black and white. "I won't be your prison anymore," Lucian continued. "If you want to leave, go. I'll protect you from the shadows, clear your family's debts, make sure you're safe, but you'll never have to see me again." He meant it. She could see it in his eyes. He was giving her the choice he'd never given her before. Serafina stared at the papers. Freedom. Everything she'd wanted since this nightmare began. But when she thought about leaving, about never seeing Lucian again, her chest felt hollow. This man had forced her into marriage, taken away her choices, built a cage around her life, but he'd also memorized her favorite things, sat outside her door when she had nightmares, walked into certain death to save her, begged on his knees for her life. Elliot had promised her love and given her lies. Lucian had never promised anything and given her everything. With trembling hands, Serafina tore the papers in half, then in half again, and again, until they were just pieces of nothing on the floor. "I don't want freedom if it means losing you," she whispered. Lucian stared at her like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Serafina, I choose you." She stepped closer. "Not because I have to, because I want to." Something broke in his expression. Disbelief, hope, desperate aching need. "You don't have to." "I know." She touched his face, the same way she had in that alley 3 years ago. "I know I don't have to. That's why it matters." Lucian pulled her close and kissed her, not like before, not possessive or claiming. This was different, desperate and gentle and terrified all at once, like a man who'd been dying of thirst finally finding water. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not," Serafina said, and felt him smile against her skin. "But you're stuck with me anyway." For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Serafina wasn't a captive. She was choosing her captor, freely, completely, and everything changed. Everything changed after Serafina tore up those papers. Lucian became softer. He'd hover near doorways, clearly wanting to be close, but always asked first, "May I sit with you?" Like he needed permission to exist in the same room as his own wife. He started bringing her flowers, not expensive arrangements from fancy shops, wildflowers he'd clearly picked himself, probably looking ridiculous doing it. When she laughed at the image, he actually blushed. The cooking attempt was a disaster. Lucien d'Amore, who commanded an empire with precision, couldn't make pasta without setting off the smoke alarm. Serafina found him in the kitchen, covered in flour, looking genuinely distressed. "I wanted to make your favorite," he admitted. "I watched 3 videos. How is it this hard?" She kissed his flour-covered cheek. "Order takeout. Your skills are better used elsewhere." But Serafina changed too. She stopped tiptoeing around him, started wearing his shirts around the house because they were comfortable, and she liked how his eyes darkened when he saw her in them, made demands instead of requests. "Cancel your meeting tonight. Stay home with me." And he would, without question. The real shift came during a tense negotiation with a rival family. Lucien was seconds away from violence. Serafina could see it in the set of his shoulders. She stepped forward, placed a hand on his arm. "Let me try something first." 20 minutes later, she'd talked both sides into a compromise that avoided bloodshed entirely. The other boss actually looked impressed. After they left, Damien stared at her with something close to respect. "You just prevented a war," he said quietly. "I've been trying to do that for weeks." From then on, when Damien gave security reports, he looked at Serafina too. She wasn't just Lucian's wife anymore. She was becoming something more. But not everyone was happy about the change. Valentina Noir appeared at a charity function, her smile sharp as knives. "Still playing house, I see. How quaint." "It's called a marriage," Serafina replied calmly. "You should try it sometime." Valentina's expression turned venomous. "You think you've won? You've just made yourself a target." She was right. Whispers started among rival families. Lucien d'Amore has gone soft. His wife makes him weak. Now is the time to strike. Then came worse news. Elliot had escaped police custody. Security footage showed Valentina's men breaking him out. "They're working together," Damien reported grimly. We need to increase security." But Serafina had a bigger problem. She'd been feeling sick for weeks, tired all the time. When she finally saw a doctor, the news left her frozen. Pregnant, 6 weeks. That night she sat in their bedroom, hand on her still flat stomach, terrified. How could she bring a child into this world of violence and danger? What kind of mother would do that? When Lucien came home, he knew immediately something was wrong. "What happened?" Serafina couldn't look at him. "I'm pregnant." Silence, heavy and complete. Then Lucien's knees hit the floor. He knelt in front of her and his shoulders started shaking. He was crying. "Lucien, I never thought I'd have a family," he whispered, voice breaking. "I never thought I deserved one. Everything I touch turns to violence. But you, and now..." He placed a trembling hand on her stomach. "How did I get this lucky?" Serafina's own tears fell. "I'm scared. This world, your enemies, the danger. I'll protect you both, with everything I am." He looked up at her, face wet. "I'll make the world safe for our child. I swear it." 3 days later, a car bomb exploded outside their home. Damien had been doing a security check. The blast threw him 15 feet. He survived barely, but 2 guards died. In the wreckage, they found a note. "Choose, Lucien, your empire or your weakness. You can't have both. V." Serafina stood in the destroyed driveway, staring at the message. Lucien was already making calls, mobilizing his forces, ready to go to war. She grabbed his arm. Stop. They tried to kill you. And they failed. Lucian, listen to me. She turned him to face her. I'm not your weakness. I'm your reason to be stronger. Our baby is your reason. We don't run. We don't hide. We end this. Lucian stared at her, this woman who'd gone from terrified captive to fearless queen. His eyes hardened with deadly purpose. You're right. He pulled out his phone. Damien, call everyone, every family, every alliance. It's time we reminded them why they fear the devil. Serafina squeezed his hand. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The war was coming, and this time, they weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The invitation arrived exactly 1 year after their forced wedding. Elegant card, expensive paper, Valentina's signature at the bottom. A peace summit to celebrate your first anniversary, all major families attending, neutral ground. Let's end this hostility and move forward. Damien immediately said it was a trap, but Lucian studied the guest list. Every powerful family in the city would be there. Refusing would make him look weak. We go, Lucian decided, but prepared. The venue was a historic mansion, beautiful and public. Too public for an obvious attack, Serafina thought. Maybe this really was peace. She was so wrong. The dinner was elegant. Crystal glasses, expensive wine, food prepared by award-winning chefs. Valentina played the perfect hostess, smiling at everyone, toasting to new beginnings. Serafina barely touched her food. Something felt off. 30 minutes in, Lucian's hand tightened on his wine glass. Do you feel strange? Serafina's vision blurred. Her throat felt tight. Around the room, other guests were coughing, swaying. Valentina stood, still perfectly fine. Oh dear, is something wrong? That's when Serafina knew. Poison. You see, Valentina announced to the room, I've poisoned everything. Food, wine, even the water. Slow acting but very effective. You have maybe 20 minutes before your organs start shutting down. Panic erupted. Families scrambled for exits, but Valentina's men blocked the doors, guns drawn. I have the antidote, Valentina continued, holding up a small vial. But only enough for one person. She walked toward Lucian. So choose, devil. Save yourself and rule alone, or die with your little weakness. Lucian didn't hesitate. He grabbed the vial and turned to Serafina. No. Serafina gasped as he tried to make her drink it. Lucienne, don't. I'm not watching you die. His hands shook. Please, our baby. Exactly. Our baby. Serafina grabbed his face. We're a family. We don't sacrifice each other. She kissed him, hard and desperate, and felt him freeze in surprise. When she pulled back, she'd taken half the antidote from his mouth. We live together or die together, she whispered. Lucian stared at her with absolute devastation. Serafina! The windows exploded. Damien crashed through with a team of armed men and a doctor carrying cases of antidote. Real antidote! Move! 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 But Valentina was faster. She pulled a gun, aiming straight at Lucian's heart. Serafina moved without thinking. She threw herself in front of him just as Valentina fired. The bullet hit her shoulder. Pain exploded through her body. She heard Lucien scream. A sound so broken, so inhuman, it didn't sound like him at all. Then she was falling, and he was catching her, lowering them both to the ground. No, 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 Lucian's voice cracked. Serafina, stay with me, please. Through blurred vision, she saw him stand, saw him take Valentina's gun from her trembling hands. The look on his face was beyond rage. It was apocalyptic. He shot Valentina in the stomach, not the heart, not the head, somewhere that would hurt. You took everything from me. Lucian's voice was dead calm. Now you get to feel what dying slowly is like." Valentina collapsed, gasping, bleeding. He left her there to suffer. Then he was back, cradling Serafina, pressing his hands against her bleeding shoulder. "Don't leave me, please. I can't survive losing you. I can't—" "You won't," Serafina whispered, touching his face with her good hand. Blood smeared across his cheek, but she didn't care. "I'm not going anywhere. We made a promise, remember? Together." The doctor was suddenly there, injecting antidote, working on her shoulder. Damien was coordinating the chaos, getting people help, securing the room. But Lucian only saw Serafina. He held her hand like it was the only thing keeping him alive. "You saved me," he whispered. "Again. You keep saving me." "That's what family does." Serafina smiled despite the pain. "We save each other." As the ambulance arrived and medics loaded her onto a stretcher, Lucian never let go of her hand. And Serafina realized something that made everything clear. She wasn't his weakness. She never had been. She was his strength, his reason, his salvation. And he was hers. Serafina spent 3 days in the hospital. The bullet had missed anything vital, and miraculously the baby was completely fine. The doctors called it lucky. Lucian called it a miracle. What happened to Valentina's allies wasn't lucky at all. Lucian hunted down every single person involved in the plot. It took him 2 weeks. When he was done, 3 rival families had been completely destroyed. Not just the leaders. Everyone who'd known about the poison and said nothing. At a gathering of all remaining families, Lucian made an announcement that became legend in the underworld. "My wife nearly died. My unborn child nearly died. So understand this clearly. Anyone who threatens my family threatens me, and I do not show mercy." No one questioned his authority after that. 6 months later, life had settled into something Serafina never expected. Peace. Her belly was round now, the baby kicking constantly. Lucian talked to their daughter every night, his hand on Serafina's stomach, telling her stories about her mother's bravery. The empire was changing too. Lucian had started moving money into legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, hotels. He'd never be completely clean. Too much blood in his past for that. But he was trying. "For her," he'd say, touching Serafina's belly. "I want her to be proud of her father." One evening, Lucian asked Serafina to take a drive with him. They ended up in a part of the city she barely recognized. Old, rundown, forgotten. He stopped in front of a dark alley. "This is where you found me," he said quietly. Serafina stared at the narrow space between buildings. It looked so ordinary. She couldn't imagine what had happened here. Lucian took her hand. "I was 17. My uncle sent me on what he called a loyalty test. Really, it was a suicide mission. He wanted to see if I'd die for the family." He laughed bitterly. "I was stabbed 18 times and left here to bleed out, and I was ready to die. I'd been ready for years." "Lucian, then you appeared." He looked at her, eyes wet. "You were maybe 19, wearing a blue jacket, carrying art supplies. You saw me and didn't run. You knelt down, held my hand, called for help, and you said, 'You're not alone.' And for the first time in my life, I believed someone." Tears streamed down Serafina's face. "I don't even remember—" "I know. You saved me and forgot. But I never forgot." He cupped her face gently. "I spent 3 years building an empire strong enough that no one could ever take you from me. Then I found you. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of what you gave me." Serafina kissed him there in that alley, in the place where their story had really begun. 3 months later, their daughter was born. Tiny, perfect, with her father's dark hair and her mother's eyes. They named her Elena, which meant light. Lucian cried when he held her for the first time. The nurses pretended not to notice the feared mafia boss sobbing over his newborn daughter. Now, weeks later, Serafina was painting in the conservatory Lucienne had built for her, all windows and natural light filled with her art. She was working on a portrait of Elena when she felt someone watching. Lucienne stood in the doorway, holding their sleeping daughter against his chest, looking at them both like they were the most precious things in the world. "Are you going to lurk, or help?" Serafina asked, smiling. "She's asleep. I didn't want to disturb you. You never disturb me." He came closer and Serafina kissed him softly. Elena stirred against his chest, making a tiny sound. Lucienne immediately started rocking her, his movements gentle and practiced. The devil of the underworld, completely undone by a 6-pound infant. "Who are you now, Lucian d'Amore?" Serafina asked, touching his face. Lucian looked at his wife, then down at his daughter, then back at the art-filled room that had become their sanctuary. Everything he'd never thought he could have, everything he'd never thought he deserved. "Yours," he whispered, "just yours." Outside, rain started falling. But inside, surrounded by paintings and baby toys and the quiet breathing of his sleeping daughter, Lucien d'Amore was finally home. The devil had found his redemption, and it looked like love.